It is time for Football at 4. It is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how at PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. Andrew DiCecco is back. Our division previews continue. Andrew, we're going to take a look at the NFC teams today. We're going to start in the NFC West after looking at the AFC the last 2 weeks here. The NFC West, a very interesting one. San Francisco, L.A., Arizona, and, of course, the Seattle Seahawks will be the 4 teams we look at today. So, Andrew, let's dive right into Arizona. Kind of an interesting team here. This is a team that is kind of on the way up, I guess. Kyler Murray was included on Monday in the list of the top 10 quarterbacks in football. Number 10 was Kyler Murray. Do you concur with where Murray landed on that list?
I actually think he's just outside the top 10. I think by the end of this season, he will be considered a top 10 quarterback. You'd like to see him be a little bit more consistent throwing the football, be able to win games with his arm and not so much with his legs. He does have a couple veteran wide receivers to work with this season. He's got DeAndre Hopkins, but he also has A.J. Green to work with, of course, that they just added him. So he's looking to have a career resurgence here. They have Andy Isabella, who was a smaller type of slot receiver, but he offers big playability, been very underutilized during his first couple of seasons in the NFL. So he adds another dimension to their pass attack. And Christian Kirk still there is a very solid possession receiver that can certainly knows how to break free and break tackles and can be explosive in the open field. So they have some guys there. Their offensive line, they have Rodney Hudson. You have a Kelvin Beachum, Brian Winters that they added last offseason. He's a guard. So they have – it's not as bad as it used to be, a patchwork offensive line, but it's still nothing too – it's nothing great. He still doesn't have the best protection in front of him. So he's going to have to learn how to get rid of the football and not always try to play hero ball, so to speak, and take off with his legs.
Murray, obviously a dynamic talent as a runner and a thrower. You mentioned the weapons. DeAndre Hopkins was awesome last year. We'll see what Green has left in the tank. What about Edmonds and Connor, the running back tandem there? This is the position they traded, last year. They tried to get Hopkins in. Obviously, it was a big move for them, but Johnson was their back. He really it wasn't very good for them the year before. They haven't been able to really find that running back.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they have, in theory, Mike, they have a 1-2 punch, a thunder and lightning approach with James Conner and Chase Edmonds. James Conner has really struggled with injuries in past years. He, at one point, looked like he was set to emerge, but it never really transpired. And you wonder with the shelf life of running backs if he was just a flash in the pan. And this is what you're going to see, a plodding running back with injury issues. And you hope that's not the case if you're a Cardinals fan, because Chase Edmonds is a undersized scat back that is not equipped to shoulder the lion's share of the carries. He's more of a pass-catching specialist that can play well in spurts, but not necessarily someone you want to lean on for a long period of time.
This offense should be fun, and obviously Murray makes it all go. Hopkins, great. You mentioned the offensive line. Over on defense, they added some pieces. J.J. Watt is in. Chandler Jones already good. They drafted Zaven Collins here. This is a team that has Budda Baker, Malcolm Butler. They've got some talent on this side of the ball.
Yeah, they sure do, and I really like their young pieces on the defensive line that I think are set to explode. Zach Allen, the defensive end. My guy Michael Dogby from Temple is a player who has he offers defensive tackle and defensive end versatility. He's added some weight to his frame. He's very strong at the point of attack. I think he's going to see more snaps this season. Chandler Jones is one of the more underrated pass rushers in football. So he is someone that they can look to provide consistent pass rush. Also, Marcus Golden is someone who is quietly put together a very consistent career over the past 3 or 4 years. So he's someone there. And then Zaven Collins, the linebacker, of course, from Tulsa, the bigger, more of a 3-4 type of linebacker, I would say. He actually moves pretty well for being 265 pounds. He moves very well laterally. But one thing that really stuck out to me when I was kind of looking at him during the draft process is he's not necessarily someone that can regularly get off of blocks, which is a little concerning when you consider how big he is. So that's something to look for there. But, I mean, you have to really like what they've assembled there. Buda Baker is one of my favorite defensive backs in football because he's like a Swiss Army knife, can play safety, corner, whatever you need him to do, he can do. He's a fantastic blitzer. So, I mean, and then Byron Murphy he was a second-round pick, I believe, in 2019. He's a good nickel corner. So they have some pieces there, and they have the offensive firepower. Now it's going to be, can Kyler Murray do enough to sort of elevate the offense and balance out what they have on defense?
Yeah, Jordan Hicks also there. We'll see what they end up doing with him. His name has been mentioned in some trade conversation because of
Isaiah Simmons. I totally forgot about Isaiah Simmons.
Yep, and because of the fact that they've drafted linebackers that have pushed Hicks kind of out.
Right.
All right, let's go over to L.A. We mentioned Kyler Murray. He was top 10. Matthew Stafford was also top 10 on that list. I think if I remember correctly, he was number 6 or 7 on that list. And a lot of people think that Matt Stafford could be the difference maker from making the Rams, upgrading over Jared Goff from making them, a playoff team to maybe a Super Bowl team.
And I like that you said that it is an upgrade. It's a clear upgrade. Matthew Stafford is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in football. When you look at his body of work throughout his career, he's a tough guy, hasn't necessarily got the support up front on the offensive line, has often had to carry offenses, and Jared Goff has never done that. So I think that Matthew Stafford has that it factor that can really capitalize on the receiving core that they really constructed there in L.A. Love Cooper Kupp. Robert Woods, to me, is such an underappreciated wide receiver. He can do it all. Probably you can make a case that he's the most underrated wide receiver in football. Just look at his record, look what he can do and his impact. And Van Jefferson's there. Van Jefferson's a good third receiver. Remember, they lost Josh Reynolds to the Titans. So Van Jefferson's going to take on an elevated role, and he's a fantastic route runner, great hands over the middle, sure-handed guy. Tyler Higby is a tight end. Tyler Higby has been very inconsistent. I think he gave Nate Gary fits when the Eagles played them, go figure, but he's someone that I think will be utilized a lot more with Matthew Stafford at the helm than when Jared Goff took the reins there. So, and Cam Akers, I think, is going to be one of the bigger breakout stars of this 2021 season at running back.
Yeah, and Daryl Henderson's another guy who doesn't get a lot of fanfare, but he's a good one. You mentioned Cooper Kupp. They got Desean Jackson out there now. I'm interested to see if they get a healthy version of Desean Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, and if they do, he's the guy that really is going to transform the aerial attack because they don't necessarily have someone who can get over the top and change the game in one play, and he has that, and he can bring that. So you wonder if they're just going to kind of have him on a snap count and try to preserve him because he could be a difference maker when you look at how closely contested some of these teams are in the NFC West.
Yep, it should be an interesting offense now with Stafford as opposed to Goff on the Rams' offensive side of the ball. Their defense, Aaron Donald, obviously it starts there. And then, obviously Jalen Ramsey, he's the best corner in football. So they have the best guy up front. They have the best guy on the corner. But they've got some other guys that don't get enough play because of the fact that they play with Donald and Ramsey.
Yeah, Ashawn Robinson's a solid player. And Sebastian Joseph Day is another he's a powerful interior lineman that, like you said, he's not necessarily a household name, but these guys are quietly getting the job done, and they are the beneficiaries of the double teams that Aaron Donald sees. So those are guys that I like. I like Micah Kaiser at linebacker. Troy Reeder was a player who I had a chance to see his pro day at Delaware. A really nice story, undrafted free agent, and he's a starting inside linebacker for them. Doesn't run particularly well, so you wonder about the athleticism on that second level. I think that could be a little bit of cause for concern. But then on the back end, I mean, you have the best cornerback in football in Jalen Ramsey. Also, John Johnson is going to be the safety that they had is going to be a big loss for them, and I think they're really going to feel that. But they have Taylor Rapp. Let's not forget who they drafted in that safety-heavy draft of 2019. So
I like
it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this Rams team with the upgraded quarterback is going to definitely be one to watch in that NFC West. Let's go to a team in San Francisco. They went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and injuries just absolutely wrecked them last year. This team's healthy, but Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance, I guess that will be a huge story to watch. They also have Josh Rosen, a former number 1 first-round pick on that roster, too. Nate Sudfeld is there. So they have a pretty interesting quarterback room. But I think for a team that has some high expectations, the Garoppolo-Lance thing will certainly be something to watch at camp.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the biggest storylines of the summer to see what happens because Jimmy Garoppolo's stranglehold on that starting position is tentative at best. Now, do I think he's going to come out of the summer as the starting quarterback? Yeah, I do believe so, but I don't think that he's going to finish the season as the starter. Very inconsistent, has struggled to stay healthy, and really just never took the next step in his progression that many thought that he would. So he kind of holds that offense back, in my opinion, and I really love what they've done at the wide receiver position. I'm a big Deebo Samuel fan. He's what I envision how the Eagles utilizing Jalen Reagor this year. Brandon Ayuk, I mentioned Cam Akers being a breakout player this year. I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be one of the more breakout wide receivers this season. I think Deebo is more of that physical, open field guy. Is going to break tackles, kind of like how Golden Tate really was for the Seahawks early in his heyday before he became banged up. And I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be the more explosive threat that can score from anywhere on the field. So I really love that. And then pair that with George Kittle, who is he struggled with injuries last year, but I think people may forget that he's a top tight end in football that can really work all three levels of the field, and he's a load to bring down after the catch. So they have the guys that can really sort of affect the aerial attack in a big way. So now it's up to Jimmy Garoppolo to elevate that. I don't know that he can do that.
Yeah, this is interesting. You mentioned Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. You mentioned those guys, but the running back, Mostert, they use him very well. They've used their running backs really. I love the way that Shanahan utilizes the speed on his team too. And they also use the fullback there. I mean, they have a variety of weapons.
Check, yeah.
Yep, they have a variety of weapons. And how they use them. I think Shanahan does such a great job of play design.
Yeah, you're right. And Kyle Juszczyk is another huge weapon for them. He's an athletic fullback that can catch the ball well. He can run for some yards. It's a rarity that you see a fullback have that kind of impact in today's NFL, but he has that ability to do so. And running back situation, which you mentioned, they have Raheem Mostert, who is one of the fastest players in the NFL. Get him in open space, and he's going to he's a threat to score anytime he touches the ball. And I really like what he can do. Now, I don't know that he's a volume runner. He's a little bit undersized. I believe he goes maybe about 190, 195. He's someone that I think can maybe play about 10 snaps, can take about 10 touches a game to avoid wearing him down. But Elijah Mitchell is another player who I mentioned on your show, I believe, out of Louisiana Lafayette. He's a rookie. He was taken in the 6th round this year. He is a between-the-tackles thumper, but he can also has enough speed and athleticism to burst it outside and turn the corner and pick up some yards that way. He's not a breakaway threat, but he can kind of complement what you have there, Raheem Mostert. And Wayne Gallman, of course, from the New York Giants, is there as well. But I think Elijah Mitchell gives them a little bit more in the power running game.
This is a good offensive line, too. Trent Williams, probably the best tackle in football. Alex Mack, one of the better centers. Laken Tomlinson, another high-regarded McGlinchey. So they're pretty good up front.
Yeah, that's the thing. Their offense right now is equipped at every level, with the exception of quarterback. I think that Jimmy Garoppolo holds this offense back. And like I said, I don't think it's going to be very long before you start to see Kyle Shanahan get a little antsy to plug his rookie quarterback in there, and I think Trey Lance will eventually, once he kind of finds his footing and gets used to acclimated to the NFL, the speed of the NFL game. I think you're going to see him get plugged in there, and then you're going to see a very explosive offense.
Defensively, too, this is a very good defense. This is a team that made it to the Super Bowl with Garoppolo, and that defense was the reason why. Armstead, Bosa, Warner. They got some high-level names on this side of the ball as well.
Yeah, Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Nick Bosa, and then at the second level you have Fred Warner, who's one of my favorite linebackers to watch. He can do everything that you need him to do, and he has a skill set that translates very much to the modern day NFL. He can cover, he can play the run, but he's just so fluid sideline to sideline, and I think he already started to become a household name, but I think now people are going to start to classify him as one of the top linebackers in football, as they should. And Dre Greenlaw is a solid player as well. What a find for them in the 5th round in 2019. And then when you look at the safety position, Jason Verrett's a corner who I've always really liked when he was with the Chargers. Very good short area quickness, can remain in phase with all different types of receivers. Isn't a big corner, but he's really struggled to stay healthy. You hope that he can stay healthy. He's such a fun player to watch. The history's there. I don't know if they can count on him. But, I mean, you have other guys like Jimmy Ward, and you have Dante Johnson at corner, and K'Wan Williams at nickel, who the Eagles kind of poked around that during free agency. He's a little bit of an older player, but he's a solid nickel corner. And Jaquaski Tart is there as well. So, I mean, they do have some pieces. It's just, I think that if they can get at least maybe 12 games of help out of Jason Verrett, which it seems like it's not asking much, but it really is in his history, I think they can be one of the better secondaries in that division.
Looking at the NFC West, our previews continue with Andrew DiCecco, the final team, Seattle. This is a bunch that obviously has a lot of talent, led by Russell Wilson. He was the fourth-rated quarterback in ESPN's top 10. Last year, he had more interceptions than the previous 2 years combined. Obviously, Wilson, though, is the guy who makes this whole thing go. He wanted to get more weapons out there. They wanted to be a team. They have Metcalf and Lockett, and this is a team with Chris Carson. They've got all the pieces. Wilson, early in his career, took a lot of sacks. Their offensive line has gotten better. So this should be a pretty good Seahawks offense.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Russell Wilson bounce back. He can do it all. He can win games with his legs. He can make some of the most insane throws of any quarterback that I've seen. Just such a gifted player, sees the field incredibly well, knows how to get everybody involved on offense. And I think when you look at the weapons that he has, Chris Carson is one of my favorite running backs to watch. Was a power runner at Oklahoma State, seventh-round pick, was sort of labeled as a power runner, but then his game sort of evolved when he got to the NFL level, and you started to see him be utilized in the passing game, and they use him in different ways. So, and Rashad Penny's there as well, but he has not been able to kind of stave off the ascension from Chris Carson. So I think he still has a stranglehold on that spot. And then the offensive line, the tackles, you have Dwayne Brown, you have Brandon Shell, who was with the New York Jets, struggled there. So they're outside of Dwayne Brown, I think it's still a little shaky there. Gabe Jackson is the right guard. He used to be with the Raiders, of course. So I mean, Seattle seems to always have a leaky offensive line, and you always find that Russell Wilson's running for his life. They've done an adequate job patchworking that, but they still have a long way to go before they're considered in the upper echelon of offensive line in the NFL. But the wide receivers, this is the year where DK Metcalf becomes known as an elite wide receiver in this league.
Oh boy,
he reminds me so much of Terrell Owens, who can just big body, freak of nature type guy, can separate, can run every route in the route tree. One of the better deep threats that you'll find for his size, which is remarkable, and a red zone weapon, and just a threat at every level. And he's such a rare athlete in that he can just do it all. And then on the other side of him, you have Tyler Lockett, who's more of a shorter, quicker, shiftier receiver. They can you utilize a short area quickness to create yards after the catch. So they have a really good balance there at wide receiver. And Dwayne Eskridge was the receiver who they drafted out of Western Michigan in the second round this year. And he's someone that it's a combination of sort of like a bigger version of Tyler Lockett, I would say.
Over on defense, for years you had the Legion of Boom. Their defense kind of took a little step back. Carlos Dunlap's a little older. They brought him over. Alden Smith, who's had all sorts of problems. This is a team with Bobby Wagner, very good linebacker. Jamal Adams, very good safety. Diggs, very good safety. They're still a pretty good defensive team.
Yeah, they are. And Poona Ford is one of the more underrated defensive tackles in football. I believe he only goes about 5'11". He wasn't drafted, but he's just been such a solid contributor to that defense since they sort of found him in the 2018 undrafted class. Great story there. The linebacker, you mentioned Bobby Wagner, but there's also Jordan Brooks, who was a surprise first-round pick in the 2020 draft out of Texas Tech. I had a third-round grade on him, but he's just such an athletic specimen, has great traits and tools to work with that I think that they saw his skill set really transitioning to the current defensive landscape in the NFL. And so they have a really good pair of linebackers there. And then in the secondary, moving over there, Jamal Adams, of course, is there. Playing next to him will be Marquise Blair, who was a second-round pick, I believe, from Utah in 2019. Quandre Diggs is also there as well. He's more of a Swiss Army knife, do-it-all defensive back, much like Buda Baker, who we mentioned earlier, and Tyrann Mathieu with the Chiefs. And so they have a lot of guys there. And in my opinion, Seattle is still the class of this division.
Great stuff as always from Andrew DiCecco. Our division previews, we continue on Friday when Andrew's back. We will go over to the NFC South. But for today, the NFC West, Arizona, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, very competitive division. How do you see it playing out?
Well, I have Seattle still being the class with the veteran Pete Carroll there and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson just is such a game changer for me, and he just has that it factor. So he's going to be the X factor for them. So I'm going Seattle at the top spot. Then I'm going with the Rams because I really think that Matthew Stafford is going to be it's going to sort of transform that offense and maximize the abilities that they have and the pieces in place. Then I think it's going to go Arizona, and then I have the 49ers.
Wow. 49ers in last, eh? All right. That'll be an interesting one. That's a really good – all four of those teams can make the playoffs. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And all it takes is a play here or there, an injury here or there, and all of a sudden you could have all these teams very close and it could be a very closely contested division all the way through the season.
We'll keep our eyes on that. And again, we will have the NFC South on Friday when Andrew is back here on the Sports Bash, our division previews. And then next week it'll be the North and the East. And then when Andrew's back, the following Tuesday, the Eagles will open up training camp that Tuesday, and we'll be all over it here for Football at 4. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and Andrew DiCecco here. Thanks to our friends at PropSwap. Andrew, thanks so much, man.
You got it, Mike. Have a good night.
All right, Andrew will be back on Friday, and, of course, we will continue with the previews brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. All right, July the 13th. Do you remember events that happened on this day? We will go through those coming up. Plus, Cam Rogers gives you some insight on the British Open, the Open Championship. We missed Cam yesterday, so we'll have Cam on today as he will break down who will win the event, who you should be betting on. We'll take a look at that with Cam Rogers coming up at 4:40 today, plus the PT's in the house, the Derby, the All-Star Game. We'll look back at the Derby, ahead to the All-Star Game. We got all that coming up on the Sports Bash.